Throughout history, faith has inspired empires, built civilizations, started wars, and shaped the moral compass of billions. But buried inside religious history are mysteries that refuse to fade. A cloth bearing the image of a crucified man that science still debates. Ancient scrolls hidden in desert caves for 2,000 years. An ark said to contain divine power that vanished without a trace. Mass visions witnessed by tens of thousands. Prophecies that some believe are unfolding right now. These are not myths told around campfires. They are documented events. And historians still don't agree on what really happened. Religion is often presented as a matter of belief. But history deals in evidence, documents, artifacts, eyewitness accounts, carbon dating, archaeological layers beneath sand and stone. And when faith intersects with physical evidence, things become complicated. Because sometimes the relic exists. Sometimes the manuscript is real. Sometimes thousands of witnesses sign their names. And yet, the explanation remains uncertain. Tonight, we examine 7 religious mysteries that continue to challenge historians, scientists, and scholars alike. Not to prove, not to disprove, but to understand why, centuries later, the questions still remain. Mystery 1. The Shroud of Turin. In a quiet cathedral in Turin, Italy, there lies a piece of linen cloth. Faded, fragile, nearly 14 feet long. Across its surface appears the faint image of a man, bearded, wounded, crucified. For millions of Christians, this is the burial shroud of Jesus of Nazareth. For historians and scientists, it is one of the most controversial religious artifacts in existence. The image is not painted, not stitched, not dyed. It appears as a negative, meaning when photographed, the details become clearer. That discovery, made in 1898 by photographer Secondo Pia, shocked the world. When he developed the photographic negative, the face became strikingly detailed, as if the cloth itself had acted like film. How could a medieval relic contain photographic properties centuries before photography existed? Scientific testing only deepened the mystery. In 1988, carbon dating tests were conducted by laboratories in Oxford, Zurich, and Arizona. The result, the cloth dated between 1260 and 1390. Medieval, not 1st century. For many historians, that settled it. Case closed. But then new questions emerged. Textile experts argued the tested sample came from a repaired section of the cloth, not the original fabric. Others pointed to pollen grains found on the shroud, some originating from plants native to the Middle East. Forensic studies suggested the bloodstain patterns were anatomically consistent with crucifixion wounds. Yet skeptics countered. Medieval artists were capable of remarkable skill. And history records that relic creation was widespread in the Middle Ages. So, what is it? A masterpiece forgery? A misunderstood artifact? Or something far older than the carbon tests suggest? The Church itself has never officially declared it authentic. Instead, it calls the shroud an icon, a symbol of faith, which leaves historians in an unusual position. The artifact exists, the image is real, the tests conflict, and after more than a century of study, no consensus has been reached. Mystery 2. The Ark of the Covenant. According to the Hebrew Bible, the Ark of the Covenant was no ordinary object. It was a sacred chest, built from acacia wood and overlaid with gold. Inside were said to be the stone tablets of the 10 Commandments, given to Moses on Mount Sinai. But the Ark was more than symbolic. Scripture describes it as powerful, dangerous, capable of bringing victory in battle, and death to those who touched it improperly. It was carried through the wilderness, placed inside the first temple in Jerusalem, guarded in the Holy of Holies. And then it disappeared. When the Babylonians destroyed Jerusalem in 586 BCE, the Ark was not listed among the captured treasures. It was simply gone. Since then, theories have multiplied. Some Jewish traditions suggest priests hid it before the Babylonian invasion. Others claim it was taken to Egypt. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church maintains that the Ark resides in Aksum, guarded in a chapel where only one monk may see it. No outsider is permitted inside. Historians, however, remain cautious. There is no confirmed archaeological evidence of the Ark's survival. No verified remains. No ancient inventory listing its final location. Some scholars argue the Ark may have been destroyed during the Babylonian conquest. Others suggest it may never have existed as described, that the biblical accounts were theological narratives, not literal history. Yet here is what unsettles researchers. Ancient Near Eastern cultures did create sacred portable shrines. The Ark's design resembles known ritual objects of the time. So the concept is not impossible, and the absence of evidence does not confirm destruction. For more than 2,500 years, the Ark of the Covenant has remained missing, a relic central to religious identity, vanishing at the exact moment history becomes turbulent, and the silence surrounding its fate has never been broken. Mystery 3. The Dead Sea Scrolls. In 1947, a Bedouin shepherd threw a stone into a cave near the Dead Sea. Instead of the dull thud of rock on sand, he heard pottery shatter. Inside that cave were jars. Inside the jars were scrolls, ancient, fragile, written in Hebrew and Aramaic. Over the next decade, more than 900 manuscripts were discovered in 11 caves near Qumran. Some dated back to the 3rd century BC. Among them were copies of biblical texts, including the oldest known manuscripts of the Hebrew Bible ever found. But the scrolls did more than confirm scripture. They revealed variation. Subtle textual differences from later standardized versions, alternate phrasings, additional passages, community rules from a Jewish sect believed to be the Essenes. For historians, this discovery was monumental. It proved that biblical texts evolved over time, copied, edited, transmitted by human hands. But here's where the mystery deepens. Why were the scrolls hidden? Most scholars believe they were concealed during the Roman advance in the 1st century CE. But not all scrolls match the Qumran community's ideology. Some appear to come from outside Jerusalem. Were these simply a sect's library? Or part of a broader religious archive hurriedly hidden? Then came another layer of controversy. For decades, access to the scrolls was tightly controlled by a small group of scholars. Critics accused the team of withholding certain fragments. Rumors spread that some scrolls contained theological material that challenged traditional narratives. When the full collection was finally made public in the 1990s, no dramatic contradictions emerged. But the episode left a lingering distrust. Even today, scholars debate. How centralized was early Jewish belief? How fluid were sacred texts? How much of what we consider fixed scripture was once in flux? The Dead Sea Scrolls didn't destroy faith, but they revealed something undeniably human about it. Sacred texts, like civilizations, are shaped by time, and beneath the sands of the desert, history preserved a version of belief that still forces scholars to reconsider what was once assumed permanent. Mystery 4. The Miracle of the Sun. On October 13, 1917, an estimated 30,000 to 70,000 people gathered in a field near Fatima, Portugal. They were waiting. For months, 3 shepherd children had claimed that the Virgin Mary appeared to them. She had promised a miracle on that specific day, visible to all. News spread quickly. Believers, skeptics, journalists, and government officials all came to witness what many expected to be a public embarrassment. It had rained heavily the night before. The ground was muddy. Clouds hung thick in the sky. Then, shortly after noon, witnesses reported that the clouds parted. The sun appeared as a silver disk. And then, according to thousands present, it began to move. Some said it spun rapidly, casting multicolored light across the crowd. Others claimed it zigzagged toward the earth before returning to its position. Many described the soaked ground drying almost instantly. Newspapers documented the event, not religious pamphlets, secular press. Yet no astronomical observatory recorded abnormal solar activity that day. The sun did not physically move, which leaves historians and scientists with a complex puzzle. What happened? Some propose a collective optical illusion, a phenomenon known as retinal afterimage, where staring at the sun creates apparent motion. Others suggest atmospheric distortions caused by unusual cloud formations. Mass suggestion has also been proposed, the power of expectation influencing perception. But that explanation has limits. Witnesses included skeptics who arrived specifically to disprove the prophecy. And yet some of them reported seeing unusual movement. Psychologists acknowledge that large crowds can share perception shifts under heightened emotional states. Still, mass hallucination is a strong claim, and historians remain divided. The Catholic Church later declared the event worthy of belief, not mandatory, but credible within tradition. For believers, it was divine confirmation. For scientists, it remains an example of how environment, psychology, and expectation can converge. The miracle of the sun is not a mystery because we lack theories. It is a mystery because none of the explanations fully eliminate doubt. And when tens of thousands claim to see the same impossible thing, history pauses. Mystery 5. The Voynich Manuscript. Locked inside the Beinecke Rare Book Library at Yale University, there is a manuscript no one can read. It is written in an unknown script. The alphabet resembles nothing else in medieval Europe. The illustrations are just as strange. Plants that do not exist. Astronomical diagrams unlike any known system. Women bathing in what appear to be interconnected green tubes. Radiocarbon dating places the parchment in the early 15th century. The ink appears consistent with that era. The binding is authentic. This is not a modern fake. Yet no linguist has successfully decoded the text. Cryptographers have tried. Artificial intelligence models have tried. Codebreakers from World War II even attempted it. Nothing has produced a universally accepted translation. Some scholars believe it is an elaborate medieval hoax, a meaningless text designed to look mysterious and be sold at high value. Others argue the structure of the language appears statistically consistent with real linguistic systems. The repetition patterns resemble grammar. But if it is a language whose no other manuscript uses the same script, no known culture records it. Theories range widely. A lost herbal medical manual, an encoded alchemical text, a constructed artificial language centuries ahead of its time, or something far simpler, a sophisticated cipher that modern methods have yet to unlock. The manuscript was named after Wilfrid Voynich, a rare book dealer who acquired it in 1912. Since then, it has become one of the most studied, unreadable texts in history. What makes it baffling is not just its secrecy, it is its authenticity. This is not myth. It is ink on parchment, carbon dated, preserved, examined, and still silent. In an age when ancient scripts like Egyptian hieroglyphs and Linear B have been decoded, the Voynich manuscript remains mute, which raises a possibility that unsettles historians. Perhaps there are voices from the past that we may never hear clearly again. Mystery 6. The Lost Gospels removed from the Bible. In the early centuries of Christianity, there was no single, unified Bible. There were letters, testimonies, teachings passed from community to community. Some texts were embraced widely, others were debated, and some were rejected. Among the most controversial were what we now call the Lost Gospels. The Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Mary, the Gospel of Judas. These texts were not hidden in medieval vaults. They were discovered in the 20th century, most notably in 1945 near Nag Hammadi, Egypt. Inside a sealed jar were 13 ancient codices. Their contents revealed alternative Christian writings, some dating back to the 2nd century. The Gospel of Thomas, for example, presents sayings attributed to Jesus, but without narrative structure. The Gospel of Judas portrays Judas not as a traitor, but as a participant in a divine plan. The Gospel of Mary suggests Mary Magdalene may have held a leadership role among early followers. For historians, these texts do not necessarily rewrite Christianity, but they reveal diversity. Early Christian communities were not monolithic. They debated theology. They differed on authority. They held competing views of Jesus' nature. By the 4th century, church councils formalized the canon, selecting which books would become scripture. The rest were labeled apocryphal. or heretical. This was not necessarily conspiracy. It was consolidation. But the mystery remains. What might have been different if other texts had been included? Were these writings suppressed because they were dangerous? Or excluded because they lacked theological consistency? Modern scholarship tends toward the latter. Yet the existence of these texts demonstrates something historians cannot ignore. Religious history is shaped by human decisions. And behind the formation of sacred scripture were debates, disagreements, and power structures. The lost Gospels are not secret codes. They are fragments of early belief, preserved in desert sand, and rediscovered centuries later. They don't overturn history, but they complicate it. Mystery 7. The Prophecy of the Last Pope. In the late 16th century, a mysterious document surfaced in Europe. It was attributed to Saint Malachy, a 12th century Irish archbishop. The document contained a list of short Latin phrases, 112 of them. Each phrase was said to describe a future pope. The prophecy claimed to outline the papacy from Malachy's time to the end of the church. For centuries, the list attracted little attention. Then, historians noticed something strange. The mottos seemed remarkably accurate, but only up to the late 1500s. After that point, the descriptions became vague, ambiguous, open to interpretation. For example, one pope was described as from the labor of the sun. Supporters later connected this to Pope John Paul II, born during a solar eclipse and buried during another. But critics argue such associations are made after the fact, retrofitting symbols to events. Historians now widely believe the prophecy was a forgery created around 1590, possibly to influence a papal election. The descriptions before that year align too perfectly with known popes. The ones after grow increasingly symbolic. Yet the final entry remains the most unsettling. It describes a pope called Peter the Roman, who will shepherd the church during Great Tribulation, after which Rome will be destroyed and judgment will follow. When Pope Benedict XVI resigned, something nearly unheard of in modern times, speculation surged. Was this the sign? When Pope Francis was elected, debate intensified. Some saw symbolic connections. Others dismissed it entirely. From a historical perspective, the prophecy of the last pope is likely a political creation, a clever forgery embedded into religious culture. But what fascinates historians is not its authenticity. It is its endurance. Why do such prophecies persist? Why do they resurface during times of uncertainty? Because prophecy occupies a unique space between history and hope, between fear and faith. The document may be a forgery, but the human need to find patterns in unfolding events is not. And so the prophecy continues to circulate, not because it is proven, but because it resonates. From relics wrapped in linen, to sacred chests that vanished in war, from scrolls hidden in desert caves, to manuscripts no one can read, from mass visions in open fields, to forgotten gospels buried in sand. Each of these mysteries occupies the space where faith and history meet. And that space is rarely simple. Historians do not approach these mysteries to dismiss belief, nor to confirm it. They approach them because evidence exists, artifacts remain, documents survive, and questions endure. The shroud still draws millions. The Ark remains missing. The scrolls continue to be studied. The Voynich manuscript remains unread. And the debates over early Christian texts reshape scholarship even now. What makes these mysteries powerful is not that they defy explanation entirely. It is that they resist finality. They remind us that history is not a closed book. It is a living investigation. And sometimes, the most enduring mysteries are not the ones that lack evidence, but the ones where evidence refuses to settle the debate. Because, in the end, faith seeks meaning, history seeks understanding, and between them, there will always be questions.